We'll do another example with speed units here. This question says that a common snail can move at 0.03 miles per hour. Convert this into millimeters per second. Let's first write down what we have and what we need. Right now we have miles per hour, which we can abbreviate as miles on top, hours on bottom of a fraction. We're going to need millimeters per second. We'll write that's millimeters divided by seconds on the bottom. This means we'll need to take our miles and change to millimeters, and also take our hours and change to seconds. We'll label the conversion of the top part, miles to millimeters, as part A of this problem, and then hours to seconds as part B of this problem. We'll say in part A, I have miles, but I need to go to millimeters. Miles is a US unit, and millimeters is a metric unit. Note that we don't have a miles to millimeters conversion, but we do have a miles to kilometers conversion. This piece of information will be important because we can start with miles and go to kilometers. Kilometers is a metric unit, and let's remind ourselves that we can freely convert in between metric units. These kilometers we could change back to the base unit, meters, and then change from the base unit to the millimeters. Therefore, this conversion from miles to millimeters will be 3 steps. The first conversion will be miles to kilometers, using this information that I'm going to box in yellow. I'll label that as a 1. The second step will be kilometers to meters, which I'll label as step 2. And the third step will be meters to millimeters, which I'll label as step 3. Let's remind ourselves of our unit conversions in the metric system. We know 1 meter is the same as 1,000 millimeters, because every one of the base unit in the metric system is 1,000 of the milli version of the base unit. Similarly, 1 kilometer is 1,000 of the base unit. Therefore, kilometers to meters will be my second step. I'll label that with a 2. And then meters to millimeters, I've labeled as step 3. We'll label that with a 3. Now let's handle the conversion. Our number of miles that we start with is 0.03 miles. We'll multiply that by 3 fractions. In our first fraction, we'll get out of miles and into the end of step 1, that's kilometers. Then I send those kilometers to the bottom and move on to the next step after kilometers. That's meters. Then I take those meters and move them to the bottom. And at the end of step 3, I want millimeters. Let's have a look at our step 1 unit conversion information. Inside of the box that I've labeled for step 1, we have 1 mile is 1.61 kilometers. I'll place 1 next to miles and 1.61 next to kilometers. Then for step 2, which I've labeled in green here, 1 kilometer is 1,000 meters. 1 must go next to kilometer, 1,000 goes next to meters. Then for my final step, which I've labeled with a blue 3, 1 meter converts to 1,000 millimeters. So 1 goes next to meters, 1,000 goes next to millimeters. Now my operation is 0.03 times 1.61 times 1,000 times another 1,000. We'll go to the calculator with this now. We say 0.03 times 1.61 times 1,000 times another 1,000. When we press enter, we'll get 48,300. Let's check our units briefly. We started with miles, and that canceled out with the bottom of the first fraction. Then we had kilometers, but that cancels out with the bottom of the second fraction. And then we had meters, but that cancels out with the bottom of the third fraction. And as expected, we have millimeters as our final unit. Box that in, and we'll label that as the answer to part A. Now we move to part B. For part B, we're going to look to the bottom of the fractions we had at the beginning. We had hours to start with, but we want to go to seconds. I'll write down for part B, we're going to go from hours to seconds. Since we were not given a number for hours, we can use the invisible 1. We can say it's 0.03 miles per 1 hour. They will usually not give you a number for the second unit, and if they don't give you that number, use the invisible 1. We'll write 1 hour here. Then we'll multiply that by a fraction to get out of hours and into seconds. Now, this conversion may not be on your reference pages, but it would be good to remember this because this comes up quite a bit. When we're dealing with units of time, 1 hour is equal to 3,600 seconds. Since I'm getting out of hours and into seconds, the 1 must go next to hours. 3,600 goes next to seconds. I have 1 times 3,600, divide by 1. Neither of the ones affect the answer, and I get 3,600 seconds. This will be my answer to part B. With these two pieces of information, we'll finish out the problem on the next page. Here I've placed my answers to part A and B that we worked on the first page. I'm also reminding us that our end goal is that we need millimeters over seconds. So we're going to write a fraction that has millimeters on the top and seconds on the bottom. I'm going to put my number of millimeters on the top of a fraction, 48,300, and then we're going to divide by our seconds, which were 3,600. When I divide these, I'll get an answer in millimeters per second. Now we'll just need to divide the numbers. I'll go to the calculator now. With my 48,300 stored in the calculator already, I divide by 3,600. When I divide, I get 13.42 if I round. Therefore, the speed of my snail is 13.42 millimeters per second. This is a very tiny speed unit, but it seems faster than saying 0.03 miles per hour.